Hey guys, Consecrated Worm here, and we need to talk about roaming supers and why they need help. Uh, now, roaming supers used to reign supreme on the battlefield, no question about that. But since those days, one-off supers have substantially taken their place and all but eliminated them. Now, when I say one-off supers, I'm talking about one-off offensive supers, not defensive supers like Tether, Bubble, or the Well of Radiance. More specifically, like Thunder Crash, Nova Bomb, Gathering Storm, things like. Um, but yeah, let's talk about why, like, what's going on with these and how potentially we can fix them. So starting off, I want to give Bungie a big props. Okay, Bungie has done a great job working towards eliminating the issue. Of course, in the blog post from the other day, they talked about a lot of changes, which you can go read over there. But specifically, roaming supers and one-off supers. And roaming supers, the only change they have made is that roaming supers will now generate 7 orbs of light, as opposed to the 5 that they currently make, which I didn't even know that was a thing. But wow, yeah, I didn't know that. But one-off supers have, I think I said one-off supers. Roaming supers have had their maximum number of orbs of power increase from 5 to 7. One-off supers have been changed to decrease the number of orbs of power that they generate by 2, dropping them from 7 down to 5. So basically, they just kind of switched one-off supers and roaming supers orb generation with one another. And this is a great step in the right direction, but I think that, of course, more needs to be done. And I hope that in the future we do see more done to help mitigate the difference between one-off supers and roaming supers, but we'll see. In the meantime, let's talk about it. Now, there was one other change that was made. They reduced the cooldown of Hammer Soul, Daybreak, and Spectral Blades from a tier 5 to a tier 4. So now there's no longer 5 tiers of supers, there's only 4. And those ones in the bottom tier were brought up just 1 level, basically. But why are one-off supers better? Now, there's a couple of reasons why, and these reasons are in no particular order. And I don't think that any of them is more important than the other. But I want to start off with the risk factor that comes with using a one-off super versus a roaming super. The risk includes, probably one of the biggest risks is your super running out of duration in a really bad spot. Of course, in regular strikes and low-level content, this doesn't really matter as much. But when you get to Grandmaster, master level content, it's a big deal. Okay. And I think what a lot of players end up doing when they use these roaming supers, they'll activate their super, they'll run in, use it, and one of two things will happen. Either number one, they will run out of super energy and be caught with their pants down, essentially, in the middle of combat. Or number two, they'll activate their super, run into combat, kill a few enemies, and run back before their super runs out. And either way you look at this, it's either you're sacrificing yourself or you're sacrificing your super. There's no difference between the two, you know. The super durations currently are like 30 seconds, which is a good amount of time. Don't get me wrong, 30 seconds is a great amount of time, but activating your super, like using it, throwing hammers, you know, using Nova Warp decreases the amount of time you get, with the exception of Stormcaller. Stormcaller, you don't lose extra duration. But the risk factor is evidence because, you know, you're either going to risk your life or you're going to risk, you know, your super. Basically, like, what's the point of using a roaming super if you can only use it to get, you know, to throw maybe 3 hammers, and then you have to turn around and run back before you lose your damage resistance and get caught with your hands in your pants down, whatever. It's just, yeah, the super running out at the wrong time, I think, is the biggest risk factor to using roaming supers. Now, next thing, of course, is not being able to deal enough damage to a target, whether this is a boss, a champion, anything like that. You're running the risk of, okay, I'm going to activate my super. It's going to be active for, you know, 10 seconds. I can throw as many hammers as I want, Maybe it gets enough damage in, maybe not. Maybe the champion stays staggered, maybe not. And I think the biggest thing with this is champions. Champions are, in master level content, are incredibly difficult to deal with because they only stagger for a short amount of time. A short amount of time, which is much easier to throw a Nova Bomb, you know, Thunder Crash into them, something like that. To keep the to kill the champion. Roaming supers don't have that option. You know, as a hammer titan, I can chuck as many hammers as I want in a grandmaster at an overload champion, but that overload champion is going to continue to run at me once they're unstaggered, and they're going to heal completely before my super runs out. Okay, and that's a huge issue. That is, in my opinion, probably one of the most notorious issues, risk issues that I have ever encountered when using a roaming super in master and grandmaster level content. So yeah, not being able to deal enough damage. The final risk factor that I include, and this is not really one that's player controlled, or not controlled by you as the player, but rather your allies. When you activate a roaming super, you are running at enemies that your ally may very well already be shooting at. Okay, let's say you walk around a corner, you know there's going to be a big group of ads, like, oh yes, it's a perfect time to use spectral blades to cut them all up, blah, blah, blah. You run around the corner, pop spectral blades, but in that time, your teammate, your Arc Titan teammate has already thrown a Touch of Thunder storm grenade, and the ads are all dead. Of course, like I said, that's not something that Bungie can control, but hey, we're talking about risk factors here in general. So that is definitely a risk that can happen. Outside of risk, though, I think that's one-off supers have more damage potential. Now, this, I don't want people to think that I'm calling for a nerf to one-off damage, or one-off super damage, because I don't think that that's the best way to go. In fact, I think it's appropriate to have one-off supers deal a lot of damage. The problem is that one-off supers have a much higher tendency to be used against high health targets. Okay. And when you get into content like Grandmaster, everything is high health. Okay. Everything has high health. Everything has, you know, I mean, even thralls take 2-3 hand cannon shots to kill. So when we talk about higher damage, I don't think that, you know, Thunder Crash, Nova Bomb, Gathering Storm, anything like that needs to be reduced in damage. And I don't necessarily think that the roaming supers need to deal a substantial amount more damage than these, but we need to, you know, we see one-off supers being so much higher damage. It's like, what's the point? What's the point of me using hammers? You know, I can throw hammers. Enemies can only be burned by one sunspot at a time, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not like I'm just, you know, throwing down 20 sunspots on a boss, and the more sunspots they're getting, the more they're burning, the more they're igniting, stuff like that. Like, no, it's not insane like that. Okay. So again, that's what, you know, more damage potential coming from the one-off supers is a big deal. Especially again, like I said, against champions. Champions are going to be kind of a focal point of this conversation because champions are so difficult to kill with roaming supers. Finally, ease of use. Now this is one that's not really again, not players' fault. It's or I shouldn't say not a player's fault. It's not Bungie's fault. It's easier to throw a Nova Bomb than it is to use Nova Warp. You know, it's easier to throw a Nova Bomb and get back to using weapons and, you know, Rift and with the little Void Buddy and stuff like that than it is to actually put in the time to run around getting kills with a roaming super. And this is, again, it's not a player issue, but it can tie into the whole idea of high health targets. You know, if there's a bunch of champions, I'm going to use Thunder Crash. I'm going to use Nova Warp, or not Nova Warp, Nova Bomb, because it's easier to deal with the champions than it is to try to fight them. So, last thing, of course, no secret, short durations and low damage. This ties into the damage potential, or the lack of the damage potential that one-off supers have versus these supers, but also the short duration. Roaming supers have incredibly short durations and deal pitiful amounts of damage for it. In fact, when you think about it, you get into Grandmaster content, how would you use a roaming super? Would you run down into the group of enemies, activate it, kill everything till it deactivates, and then run back? Or would you activate it behind cover, run out from cover, get your kills, then before you run out of super energy, turn tail, run back to safety before your super runs out? That's pitiful. Okay. It is sad when a super can't be used to its full extent because, you know, you could die. Okay. And that's the issue with the short durations. And of course the little damage, you know, it's not comparable for champions, stuff like that. But those are kind of the primary issues that I see with this. Now, how to fix them. And I think there's 3 things that Bungie, 4 things Bungie needs to do to make them better. Okay. And how they want to do this, I'll leave it up to them. But number 1, we need to see an increase in the time that roaming supers are active. And I don't think that we need to see like an actual change to the duration, but I think that, you know, when in Hammer of Soul, throwing a hammer should not consume super energy. Okay, Nova Warp, activating whatever the light attack and the heavy attack should not cost super energy. I think that these supers with their long cooldowns need to be strong. They need to be very, very strong. Okay, so similar to Storm Trance, where, you know, you activate it, you can shock until your super runs out. That's how all roaming supers should be. Okay, no extra super energy, and with the exception of maybe if they added some super, super high damage attack. You know, in Fist of Havoc, you know, you don't lose any damage for hitting enemies with your light attack, but using your heavy attack, it takes 6% of your super away, but it deals massive damage. Okay, that's number 1. I think that's the biggest thing that Bungie can do to fix the state of roaming supers. Not only that, but increase the damage as well. I mean, the cooldowns are already so long. 9 minutes at the longest. Hammer of Soul, Daybreak, and Spectral Blades. 9 freaking minutes is a long time. And I know somebody say, oh, well, it can cut down with kills, stuff like that. But let's be honest, in most content, most difficult content where it matters, and I'm talking PvE here, not PvP. PvP is different. But in PvE content, it still takes 5 minutes to get Hammer of Soul or Dawnblade or something like that. The damage on these needs to be increased. Okay. They need to feel like a true ultra power. They need to feel like, hey, it took me 5 minutes to charge this, but for 30 seconds, I'm about to rip a new one in all of these enemies. And that's it. That's it for the damage increase. Next thing, I would also increase damage resistance. It doesn't feel good to activate your super in Grandmaster content and get cut down like butter. It really doesn't. And there's no point. Why would I use a roaming super if I know that's going to happen, when I can use something one-off, just get it in, get it done, boom, there you go. Players should honestly feel almost invincible when using these supers due to their long cooldown time. And the final change that I would make, and this is a big one, okay? Have some type of champion stunning power to the roaming supers, okay? Again, we can, you know, we go back and we talk about the situation with the Overload, you know, an Overload Minotaur and Glassway. I activate my Hammer of Soul to rip it apart, but, you know, within 5 seconds, it is back to full health. And I can't do anything about it. I'm stuck in super and can't do anything. And I'm not saying that we give, you know, Hammer of Soul all 3 champion stunning, you know, capabilities. Okay, I think that would be maybe too much. But, you know, maybe all of our solar subclasses can deal with unstoppable champions. All of our arc subclass can deal with Overload. All of our Void can deal with Barrier. I think that would be a reasonable change to the roaming supers that could help improve the time that we see them, the amount of usage that we see in them. This video is not designed to trash the one-off supers. I'm not gonna sit here and say we need to nerf this, nerf that. Bungie's already talked about some nerfs that are coming to the one-off supers. For example, Thunder Crash is getting some nerfs. Okay, and that's Bungie's prerogative, whatever. I think that we need to see more buffs to our roaming supers than we need to see to our one-off supers. Anyways, that's my thoughts on that. Please let me know in the comments below. Do you agree with this? And if not, why? Okay. The big thing is why. Because I know there's going to be some people that don't agree with this necessarily, and I want to know why. Because I like to be challenged by the community. I like people to question my line of thinking. I'm just one person. I'm not a dev. I'm not, I'm not a Destiny god, nothing like that. Like, I'm just sitting here spitballing what can happen. But yeah, those are the changes that I feel like should happen. Those are the reasons why roaming supers are not as good as one-off supers. Go check us out on Twitch at twitch.tv/thewormkeeper. And that's it for me. Bye for now.